Welcome to this explainer. Today we are going on a really fascinating journey into the sheer drama, the intense psychology, and honestly the absolute chaos of defying impossible odds. Have you ever watched a game, looked at the scoreline and just thought, well, I can turn the TV off now. It's totally done. We all have. But sometimes exactly when the world stops watching, the impossible actually happens. So today we're breaking down the anatomy of a sporting miracle.
33-0. Just let that number sink in for a second. Imagine looking up at the scoreboard at halftime and seeing your team buried under a 33-point avalanche. That was the crushing, suffocating reality faced by the Minnesota Vikings against the Indianapolis Colts back in the 2022 NFL season.
Or how about this one, 4-0. That was Paris Saint-Germain's massive lead over Barcelona after the very first leg of their Champions League tie. And if you know professional soccer, you know a 4-goal deficit against a world-class team isn't just a hurdle, it is a mathematical death sentence.
And then, of course, there's this, 28-3, the infamous Super Bowl LI scoreline. The Atlanta Falcons over the New England Patriots late in the third quarter. It's a moment in time that has basically become universally synonymous with total, utter hopelessness.
Okay, let's dive into this. How do you win when the game is already over? Seriously, how do professional athletes look at mathematical certainties, genuinely laugh in the face of logic, and somehow rewrite history? It's completely baffling, right? Well, let's find out how they do it.
Part 1. Facing the impossible deficit. Because every sporting miracle has to begin in a state of utter despair.
The numbers on this slide show the raw, unforgiving data of NFL despair. It really highlights just how incredibly rare it is to recover from a 25-plus point hole. The Vikings' 33-point rally in 2022, that holds the #1 spot. The Buffalo Bills erased 32 points back in '92. Then you've got the Colts coming back from 28 down in 2013, and the Patriots erasing a 25-point gap. Out of thousands of games played over a century of professional football, coming back from that deep has only happened a handful of times. It's like catching lightning in a bottle.
Over in the Premier League, a 3-0 deficit is widely viewed as the end of the road. History is literally littered with these collapses. Tottenham blowing a 3-0 lead to Manchester United in 2001. Leicester doing the exact same thing against Wolves in 2003. And who could forget Liverpool's infamous 3-3 draw at Crystal Palace in 2014 that completely shattered their title dreams. So when Bournemouth found themselves down 3-0 to Luton in 2024, history said it was completely over. But Bournemouth battled back to win 4-3, making them the first Premier League team in 21 years to win from that deep of a hole. Absolutely historic.
But sometimes, you don't just have one bad half. In the 2016-17 Champions League, Barcelona was absolutely decimated by PSG in Paris. Going into the second leg, they had a 4-0 aggregate mountain to climb. They didn't just need to play perfectly, they essentially needed their opponent to entirely fold.
Act 2. Shifting the momentum. This is where the tide turns, and one single spark mentally breaks an opponent.
Now, what's really interesting about this slide is the sheer compression of time. Look at this. At 8:22 in the third quarter, the Vikings are down 33-0 and finally score their first touchdown. By 2:15 in the fourth quarter, they've tied the game. They outscored the Colts by 33 points in basically just over a single quarter of game time. It shows that momentum isn't this slow burn. It's a sudden avalanche that totally paralyzes the team with the lead. And let's look at Barcelona's timeline in the second leg against PSG. They were winning the match itself, but still losing on aggregate, meaning they needed 3 massive goals with barely any time left on the clock. And then, boom, 88th minute, Neymar scores a free kick. 91st minute, Neymar converts a penalty. 95th minute, Sergi Roberto scores the winner. 3 goals in 7 minutes. The pressure of that rapid-fire succession entirely collapsed PSG's world-class defense.
Act 3. The final countdown. The sheer chaos that erupts in the dying seconds of a match.
Think about Super Bowl LI again. At 2:06 in the third quarter, the Patriots trailed 28-3. They had to systematically score 25 unanswered points across just 4 offensive drives, with 0 margin for error. They marched down the field, executed 2-point conversions perfectly, tied it with just 57 seconds left, and then marched right back down in overtime to win it. Time compression forces absolute, literal perfection from the hunters, and it induces sheer, unadulterated panic in the hunted.
And that panic is perfectly summed up right here. 2012. Manchester City needed a win to take the Premier League title but actually trailed QPR as the clock hit 90 minutes. Some City fans were literally leaving the stadium in tears. Then Edin Dzeko equalized in stoppage time, and at 90 plus 2 minutes, Sergio Aguero struck. It's a legendary moment that proves how time running out can actually serve as the ultimate adrenaline shot.
Act 4. The Miracle of Bern. Let's take a deep dive into the 1954 World Cup final to analyze the anatomy of a miracle on the grandest stage of all.
So, the crucial point is the sheer mismatch on paper. Hungary's mighty Magyars were practically invincible. Unbeaten in 31 games, full-time professionals, Olympic champions, and they had literally just destroyed West Germany 8-3 in the group stages. West Germany, on the other hand, they were a team of unproven outsiders and semi-professionals who often had to work second jobs. It was David versus Goliath, for sure. And as everyone expected, Hungary went up 2-0 in just 8 minutes. But the game was played in a torrential downpour, which was dubbed Fritz Walter weather after the German captain. Look at the frantic pace on this timeline. West Germany battled back and erased that 2-0 deficit in exactly 10 minutes, tying it up by the 18th minute. Finally, in the 84th minute, Helmut Rahn scored the winner. 3-2. Unbelievable.
To truly understand what this felt like, you have to read this quote from the live Hungarian radio broadcast by George Szepesi. In the 86th minute, Hungary thought they had tied it. The immediate sensory devastation in his voice as the goal is ruled offside is just haunting. Oh, what a pity. What a pity. It was pure heartbreak broadcast live to a totally stunned nation.
But immediately contrast that heartbreak with Herbert Zimmermann's ecstatic, legendary broadcast for German radio as Rahn scored the winner. Call me crazy, call me mental. The emotional whiplash these comebacks create is just immense. One side of the stadium is experiencing profound tragedy, while the other is feeling an almost out-of-body euphoria.
And that brings us to Act 5, the lasting legacy. Because the greatest comebacks leave scars and triumphs that transcend the sport itself.
In Hungary, the cultural and political aftermath of the 1954 loss was dire. The shock of losing the unlosable game shattered the illusion of invincibility that had been carefully crafted by the authoritarian regime. Defeat actually sparked spontaneous street protests. Authorities cracked down, revoking player privileges and even placing the goalkeeper under house arrest for alleged treason. Historians note that this unrest planted early seeds for the 1956 Hungarian uprising. It was so much more than a game.
And this brilliantly illustrates the other side of the coin. Look at this quote from historian Joachim Fest. For a post-World War II Germany, burdened by the recent past and lacking international recognition, this singular football match helped an entire nation regain a sense of identity and national pride. A sports game literally became a cultural liberation.
Connecting the miracle of Bern back to the modern day, matches like this permanently alter the psychological landscape for the players involved. Barcelona's 6-1 victory over PSG literally popularized a new term in the global lexicon, la remontada, the comeback. The trauma of that game lingered so deeply that PSG striker Edison Cavani later admitted he needed psychological therapy to overcome the shock of that specific match.
So what should you take away from all of this? It's simple, really. Whether it's the Vikings storming back from 33 points down or a football match shaping the destiny of a nation, as long as there is time on the clock, human will can bend the odds. I'll leave you with this question to think about. Is a game ever truly over before the final whistle? Thanks for joining me on this explainer, and remember, keep your eyes on the scoreboard right to the very end.